Is this homemade? It looks cheap.
With those mocking words, my son's wife, Maria, gazed at the cake on the table. The hearty, bright strawberries are placed on top of a snowy white sponge cake. Today, everyone had gathered at our house to celebrate our grandchild Yolanda's elementary school entrance. The position and number of strawberries were carefully calculated so that they could be evenly distributed to everyone gathered. Don't say that. It was made with great effort so that Yolanda would be happy, okay? When I said this, Maria made a blatantly disgusted face.
It's obvious that the cake from the shop is much better. Don't make little Yolanda be considerate of others.
But this cake.
Ugh. It made me feel bad.
As soon as she said that, she used her entire arm to slide the prepared cake off the table and onto the floor. Next, the sound of shattering plates echoed through the room. For a few seconds, I couldn't comprehend what was happening. Why? How? I just stood there dumbfounded, unable to understand the reason for her behavior.
I don't want to eat a cake made by a non-professional.
My face turned unconsciously pale. Wait, I didn't make anything.
What?
She looked puzzled. My name is Nancy. I have one son, Simon. He got married and had a child, so he lives with his wife Maria and her parents in the neighboring prefecture of the city. As parents, we were initially concerned about our only son living with his in-laws, but Maria's parents are warm-hearted people. When we visited her parents for the first time to introduce ourselves, my husband, Kevin, and I were amazed to find that her parents' house was full of urban taste. The house was furnished with simple and sophisticated furniture. The latest appliances, such as those that operate according to people's voices and movements, were incorporated to create a more urban atmosphere. The living room, dining room and kitchen were all integrated to create a spacious area. Sarah, Maria's mother, brought in cups of tea for the number of people on a tray. Her simple movement as she walked from the kitchen also looked kinda sophisticated to me. I complimented the interior, saying, "Your home is truly wonderful." Sarah responded with a genuine smile saying, "It's not that special," waved her hand in front of her own face.
It's just that the house is small, and I'm trying to make the layout of the house look bigger.
There is no large furniture in the room and the built-in storage furniture is provided against the wall. The items needed in the living room are well hidden from view, giving the room a neat and tidy appearance. A digital photo frame is placed on a small shelf in the corner of the living room. Casually glancing at it, I noticed a picture of Sarah wearing a white chef's uniform, smiling with several colleagues. She noticed my gaze and modestly said,
"I used to be a pâtissier."
Maria happily added, saying her mother's cooking is the best, and I was impressed that she is very attached to her mother. Sarah always has a gentle smile on her face exuding a soft aura. I had a great fondness for Sarah, with her urban sense of style and warm, gentle personality. Simon and Maria both valued their work greatly, so Sarah currently handled most of the household chores. Knowing that Simon enjoyed delicious meals thanks to Sarah's cooking made me happy.
Actually, Maria should be cooking for her husband, Simon. But she's not good at it.
Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses.
I'm sorry. I'm good at cooking, but I'm a bit bad at teaching others.
Her disclosure surprised me, yet I felt a weird sense of closeness towards her. We were opposites, I guess. It was a long time ago, but I was a teacher at one point in my youth. So I have some confidence in teaching people something, but it wasn't something I was good enough at to be able to teach anything. It would have been intriguing if Sarah, with her special professional experience in cake baking, had the opportunity to teach people something. Since then, Simon and Maria have maintained a smooth married life without major quarrels between them. They have a daughter called Yolanda, and both my husband and I are in love with this sweet and adorable grandchild. She visits us once a month and has grown quite attached to us. Our home, unlike her urban residence, is an old house with spaciousness as its main feature. My retired husband always made it a routine to diligently weed around the house and sweep up fallen leaves and stuff. In his younger days, our garden was filled with various trees, and has now had several trees cut down because they were too difficult to maintain. As a result, the garden became more spacious, and we planted artificial turf for a better look, which I'm satisfied with. However, there was one tree my husband refused to part with, the cherry blossom tree tucked away in a corner. Apparently, a mean relative from the neighborhood would mock our cherry blossoms every time he sees him.
Planting a cherry blossom tree in the garden is bad luck. That relative keeps harping on it. Then he keeps saying that we are fools for cutting the cherry trees and fools for not cutting the plum trees.
Having cherry blossoms in the garden was considered unlucky, yet cutting them down was also frowned upon. While it was impolite to comment on someone else's garden, my husband continued.
But whenever cherry blossoms bloom, that same guy did say our cherry tree looked beautiful. It's been a long time since he passed away.
Seeing Yolanda happily running around in the large, beautiful garden made my husband and me very happy. However, there was a moment when only Maria looked blatantly bored.
I think about this every time. This place is so inconvenient. There are hardly any convenience stores.
That's true, but it's quieter than central Tokyo, isn't it?
Quiet. I mean, there's just nothing around here.
She dropped her shoulders and left Yolanda playing in the garden as she headed indoors. Her blunt words didn't usually bother me, but this time, they stung a little. Perhaps the countryside doesn't suit her as she grew up in the city. Feeling a bit lonely, I was pulled out of my thoughts when Yolanda tugged at my sleeve, saying, "Let's play." As Simon and I chased after the giggling Yolanda, her joyful laughter echoed through the air. One day, while having such a good relationship for both families, the phone rang after dinner, watching TV with my husband. It was a call from Sarah.
Hello, is that Nancy? I wonder if it's okay to talk now.
Her gentle voice came through the receiver, accompanied by Yolanda's high-pitched laughter. I could faintly hear Simon's voice, warning her to be quiet while she was on the phone. It made me giggle. Sarah, in a calm voice, suggested having dinner together as a celebration for Yolanda's elementary school entrance. I immediately agreed, sounds great. And thought of the cherry blossom tree in our garden. Would you like to come and have a dinner party at our place? The cherry tree in the garden will be in bloom soon, and when it's in full bloom, why don't we have a cherry blossom viewing party at our house?
That would be fantastic.
She responded. Soon the topic of conversation turned to the meals at the dinner party, and we both decided to prepare the dishes together. It might be fun to bake a big cake. I thought it's a bit cheeky, but having Sarah, a former pâtissier, join me in the kitchen was reassuring. I've never made a cake before, but I'd like to give it a try.
Are you baking a cake, Nancy? That sounds wonderful.
She replies a little louder, and behind her Yolanda says excitedly.
Nana Nancy is making a cake?
Her excitement reached us through the phone, running around Sarah on the phone, which made me smile. I'm glad I decided to take the plunge and try something new. I made up my mind to buy a cake recipe book from the bookstore to make Yolanda happy. A few weeks later, after the announcement of the cherry blossom season, Tokyo began to overflow with people visiting cherry blossom spots. During the news hours, people were shown happily feasting at cherry blossom viewing spots, and my husband and I were excited about the day when we would have a cherry blossom viewing party at home as a celebration for Yolanda's school entrance. Then came the day of the dinner party. My husband had spent the morning meticulously cleaning the room. An old black and white family photo hanging on the wall of the living room shows all of my husband's relatives, probably taken at the cherry blossom tree in the garden.
Today. It would be nice if we could all take a photo together.
I smiled and agreed. The clear blue sky stretched overhead. The fully bloomed cherry blossoms in the garden attracted several white eyes, hopping from branch to branch. There is no wind and the sunshine is pleasant, making it a perfect day for cherry blossom viewing. My son and his wife, their parents and a grandchild are all here, making the house very lively. As promised, I teamed up with Sarah in the kitchen to prepare several dishes. She was interested in the size and cleanliness of my house and complimented me on the ease of use of the kitchen. It feels like an old-fashioned kitchen, doesn't it? I don't like to be separated from the main room, it's like being left out of the post-meal gathering.
But in a way, isn't the kitchen a workplace? In a dining kitchen, you will tidy up while watching the relaxed family. It can be a bit irritating.
The words irritating that came out of the mouth of Sarah with an elegant atmosphere made me laugh. While I knew her sophisticated urban home outshone mine, perhaps we're both asking for something we don't have.
With such a spacious kitchen, you could cook all sorts of dishes.
She continued, and we chatted like girlfriends. As I carried dishes to everyone starting in the large hall, Maria sat there, seemingly bored, staring at her juice-filled cup. I told her that Sarah and I would be in charge of the cooking this time. And I wanted her to be relaxed though. I decided to go back to the kitchen and stand in front of the oven waiting for the cake to bake. Sarah left me to chat in the hall, saying she would take a short break. While I was in a daze, Maria suddenly came into the kitchen and looked at the finished cake on the table. She looked at the cakes lined up in the kitchen and gave me a sour look.
Is this homemade? Looks cheap.
She scoffed, gave me a harsh comment and looked at the cake on the table. The hearty, bright strawberries are placed on top of a snowy white sponge cake. The position and number of strawberries were carefully calculated so that they could be evenly distributed to everyone gathered. Don't say that. It was made with great effort so that Yolanda would be happy, okay? When I said this, Maria made a blatantly disgusted face.
It's obvious that the cake from the shop is much better. Don't make little Yolanda be considerate of others.
But this cake.
It made me feel bad.
As soon as she said that, she used her entire arm to slide the prepared cake off the table and onto the floor. Next, the sound of shattering plates echoed through the room. For a few seconds, I couldn't comprehend what was happening. Why? How? I just stood there dumbfounded, unable to understand the reason for her behavior.
I don't want to eat a cake made by a non-professional.
My face turned unconsciously pale. Wait, I didn't make anything.
What?
Hearing the loud sound of dishes breaking, Soyman and Sarah came out into the kitchen. Sarah saw the cake on the floor and said, "What the heck?" and immediately asked Maria, "What the heck are you doing, Maria?" with a stern expression on her face. Maria looked frustrated and made a troubled face and started to touch her hair.
Nancy accidentally dropped it when she was trying to carry the finished cake.
In response to her excuse, Sarah did not even glance at me. She just remained silent and stared at Maria. I unintentionally clutched a notebook and a writing utensil in both hands tightly. She knew immediately that I did not carry the cake and dropped it. Then she was trying to figure out why Maria was lying. Her atmosphere towards Maria's aggressive stare, which refuses to look away, is different from her usual calm and gentle impression.
Nancy wanted to learn how to make cakes and was observing the cakes I was making until a while ago. It wasn't finished yet, there was no way she would carry this cake.
What? Did you make that cake?
She nodded a little sadly. Meanwhile, the oven's timer told us the cake had been baked. Sarah quickly instructed me to open the oven. I slowly took the cake out from the oven. The sweet aroma fills the air and spreads throughout the kitchen.
I was baking this sponge thinking it was for practice, but let's use this for the real thing, shall we?
She said apologetically. While the baked cake cools, she silently cleaned up the shattered plates on the floor. I quickly prepared a rag and helped, and she was quietly shedding tears. Maria stood there awkwardly, even without helping us to clean. She did not return to the hall, but just watched me and Sarah as we continued cleaning. Soon after she finished cleaning, washed her hands and then faced straight at Maria.
You threw the cake away on purpose, didn't you?
Well, I thought it was made by Nancy. I misunderstood. If I knew that you made it, this wouldn't have happened.
You are saying, you can throw it away if it was a cake made by Nancy?
She said it in a cold tone. As if she was demanding, she never looked away from Maria. Eventually, Maria realized that all excuses were not going to work, and she bowed her head towards me and apologized. I held her shoulders as she lowered her head and said, "It's okay. Raise your head back," but Saraha beside me also bowed deeply.
Nancy, I'm truly sorry.
She expressed gratitude for my efforts in learning cake making seriously, just because she used to be a pâtissier and was a bit better at making cakes than others. She mentioned about my diligent note-taking during the observation and started to tell, choking up a little.
I was so happy to bake a cake in front of such enthusiastic students.
Sarah.
Raise your head, Maria.
Sarah gave her face a big shake before slapping her cheek. There was a sound as if her skin was popping, and Maria's cheeks turned red.
Have you ever worked so hard at something before, Maria?
Well, both Mom and I were good at everything, so.
Sarah sighed deeply. She shared that her busy life as a pâtissier left little time for young Maria. Despite the little time they had, Sarah and her husband never forgot their love for Maria, and she always tried to keep a smile on her face at home. She always maintained a calm and gentle demeanor, which wasn't her original personality. She just wanted herself to be calm in front of her daughter as she didn't have much time to spend with her.
But it's also true that because of that, I couldn't show her how hard I was working and trying as a parent.
Maria got bored easily since she was little and struggled to continue with her lessons apparently. On the other hand, she often looked down on people who diligently worked toward their goals.
It's also my fault that I should have scolded you more, I'm sorry.
She worked as a pâtissier and even seems to regret not teaching her child important things during her busy life. Seeing Sarah lowering her head, an upset Maria seemed restless till she caught my eye, then lowered hers. I guess she saw the notepad I was writing in the corner of her gaze. She hesitantly asked me if she could have a look at it, so I handed her the notebook, which I hadn't prepared specifically for today. My poor memory led me to jot down various things I learned or wanted to remember. Even though I wasn't particularly skilled in cooking or cleaning, I hoped to absorb tips from those who excelled in these areas. Maria stared at the contents of the notebook that was full of writing and quietly handed the notebook back to me, her lips tightening.
I never knew you worked so hard, Nancy. I feel embarrassed now.
For her, Sarah had always been an ideal mother to be proud of. From a young age, Maria saw her as a gentle, capable woman who effortlessly handled household chores and seemed like a superman. But the truth was, Sarah worked harder than anyone else, which is why she could not tolerate the act of insulting someone who was making an effort. Just then my husband appeared in the kitchen to see what was going on. As I hesitated to explain, Sarah immediately gave a brief account of what had happened. My husband nodded quietly, thought for a moment, "I see," and then smiled calmly.
To err and not change, this is called a mistake. Perhaps you guys should consider what to do moving forward for Maria.
My husband used to teach at the local university. Maybe that's why he sometimes reverts back to the way he used to speak when he taught and sounds preachy. I found it funny and it made me laugh. Accepting our own mistakes can be hard, especially for those who lead earnest lives. But mistakes are part of life's journey. With that perspective, he concluded his talk. Eventually, when I saw that the freshly baked sponge dough on the table had cooled down, I lightly slapped my own hand. Yolanda, who had been watching fearfully behind my husband's back, was also looking on anxiously. She sensed the bad vibes between the adults. She is usually cheerful but now also quietly clings to my husband's side, gripping her dress sleeve. I bent down in front of her and smiled. "Hey, Yolanda, would you like to make a cake with Nana Sarah and Nana Nancy?"
Cake? Didn't you drop it?
"We have a sponge cake we made for practice." There are still some ingredients left over. Let's decorate with cream together. She enthusiastically nodded. I looked up and turned my gaze towards Sarah. I asked her with just my eyes to see if she could join me, then she seemed to have accepted my idea and nodded with just her eyes. We mixed cream and sugar in a bowl, placing the bowl over ice water while using a mixer to whip it. As I held the bowl steady, Sarah supported Yolanda's hands, guiding her through the mixing process. As we had not much time left, we skipped some of the steps and started applying the finished cream to the sponge. Yolanda happily applied the cream. Both Sarah and Maria were silently watching her doing it. My husband and Simon returned to the living room, probably enjoying beers. Occasionally, their hearty laughter echoed from the other room. Eventually, the cake was done and everyone decided to go outside to the garden. In a corner of the yard, away from the house, there is a large cherry tree. No one knows exactly when it was planted. We spread a blue sheet under the cherry tree and looked up at the beautiful cherry blossoms together. I handed out cakes that I had cut into portions for a number of people to everyone, and we sat down together.
It's so beautiful.
Sarah muttered and didn't say it to anyone in particular, but her words hung in the air.
It would be wonderful to have meals like this together again.
I even feel as if the incident from earlier had never happened. Her smile is surely a strength that she has not let it show, even though she is going through a lot of pain and hardship. I nodded my head in respect for Sarah and said, "Absolutely, I'd love that." Afterwards, my husband suggested that we all take a family photo together. The photo, with Yolanda in the middle and everyone smiling, ended up on the wall of my house. I guess Maria can't get over the whole fiasco yet. She became a bit distant. However, she had always had a bright, lively, and unafraid personality, so she gradually went back to usual self with a straightforward way of speaking.
Still, this house has nothing, doesn't it?
When she comes to visit our house with her family on occasional weekends, she complains and looks at the garden on the porch. Recently, she got a white puppy as a celebration for Yolanda's entrance into elementary school. She brings the puppy to our spacious yard, turning it into a makeshift dog run.
Maybe you should come visit us sometime. Our place is small, but there are plenty of delicious cake shops in Tokyo. We could go together.
She said that to me shyly and stepped towards the puppy. I put on my apron and head for the kitchen. In the kitchen, Sarah and Yolanda were happily baking a cake. Lately, I decided to start learning to bake cakes properly from Sarah. She plans to use her experience as a former pâtissier to open a baking class this time. At Sarah's request, we decided to hold the classes at our home as our spacious kitchen became the perfect venue. In this way, I will be in a position to assist her, so from now on we will be co-owners of the business. I am very surprised myself, as I ended up starting something new after my husband retired, while I was feeling a bit bored.
Do you think we are very blessed, Nancy?
Blessed? I tilted my head.
I heard from Simon. You used to be a teacher, right? If an ex-pâtissier and an ex-teacher team up, don't you think they could make the best cooking class?
I giggled. My husband continued teaching until retirement, but after I became pregnant with Simon, I resigned and I'd been a stay-at-home mom since Simon was born. For years already I had never cared about the fact that I had been a teacher, but hearing others praise that part of my past felt heartwarming.
If there was a classroom where Master Sarah and Master Nancy could teach, I bet a lot of people would gather.
She happily took my and Sarah's hands and swung them around. Soon after, Sarah and I started our cooking class at my home. While the cooking class was running smoothly, the relationship between her and me deepened. Eventually, we began to spend private time together and started to understand each other deeply. We began to help each other when we had problems, and the trust between the two of us spread among the students through the classroom, creating a very good atmosphere in the classroom. Soon, our cooking class gained attention, appearing in local events and TV shows. We both became well-known cooking school instructors. We not only taught the joy of cooking but also emphasized the importance of human connections. Time passed, and one day, Sarah and I realized something. As our class grew, so did our relationship. Shall we try something new, Sarah?
Well, we're quite old, aren't we?
Don't you want to see how far we can go? It'll be fun, won't it? She hesitated, but she readily agreed in the end. We decided to open a cake shop together. The story made by this former pâtissier and former teacher duo continues. How did you find this story? Please subscribe to our channel. Until next time.